Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock. Dr. Skippers, are you here?
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
I think as it's 2, we can start and just check who is here. I just want to confirm before we get going, does anyone know if the public have access to the meeting, whether it's being streamed on Facebook or not? Dr. Skippers?
Lizelle, can you answer that question first, please?
Hello, everyone. Yes, Chairperson, it is currently streamed.
Super. And then I'm assuming it's been advertised on Facebook as well.
Yes,
Is
it
that
has.
correct? Okay, wonderful. And I see that the agenda is on the website, and I hope that in the future it'll go onto the website as soon as it is ready.
Can somebody answer?
Dr. Skippers, I've checked. It is there. It is there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so welcome everyone. This is my first meeting as chairperson of MPAC. So thank you all for attending. You're very welcome. We move on to number 2 on the agenda, which is attendance. Firstly, 2.1 members present. Can the members just indicate whether they are present here today? Who is present? Can you just put on your cameras and indicate that you're here, please?
Good afternoon, Chair. It's Councillor Chokolo. I am here, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Chikolo. Councillor Ace, I see you. Are you?
Hi.
I see you. Thanks very much.
Thank
Then
you.
Councillor Matiwani, is Councillor Matiwani here?
Chair, Councillor Matiwani was just here by me now, and he said he should be joining it around 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, so he's not here yet. Thanks, Councillor Chikolo. Councillor Naki. No. Okay, so we have councillors, myself, Councillor Lizuko Chikolo and Councillor Ian Ace. So we are a quorum, so we can continue, and hopefully Councillor Matiwani will join us. So absent with leave is no one at the moment. 2.3, absent without leave is Councillors Matiwani and Councillor Naki. We're hoping that Councillor Matiwani will come. Well, yes.
Chair, you should note that I'm also present.
I'm going to note you at 2.6, I think.
Chair,
Or,
sorry, I'm
Okay.
taking the
What is it?
liberty to speak because I'm trying to raise my hand, but I don't know if other people experience the same problem.
I'm not seeing your hand, Dr. Skippers, but if someone is having a problem with raising their hand, just say your name and then we can go to you.
I'm saying that you're breaking up on my side. I don't know if the other people also experience the same.
Councillor Chikola, can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly, Chairperson. I couldn't hear the MM. I couldn't hear
No,
a
I'm
word.
also struggling. Dr. Skippers, I'm also struggling to hear you a bit, so the problem might be on your side. Councillor Krotz? Your hand is up. Councillor Krotz?
Thanks, Councillor Wasserman. I just want to make apologies, Councillor Matiwani is struggling to connect, and Councillor Naki. They'll be connecting as soon as they are sorted.
And what is the problem that they're experiencing? Is it IT?
Matiwani is struggling with connection problems, so he's quickly going to his office in Kayaletu. And I think
Okay.
Mama might be struggling without data at this moment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Krotz. I've made a note of that. I hope that Councillor Naki will get data so that she can attend council meetings. So other councillors present, if there are other councillors, can you indicate that you're here, please, by putting up your hand and putting on your camera? Councillor Krautz, I see you. Anyone else? No one else. Officials present. Dr. Skeppers, if you can just indicate to me who is here.
Chairperson, seeing the acting MM is struggling. Eben Phillips, Director Community Services, present.
Thank you very much, Eben.
Chairperson, Marlene Boyce, Director Planning.
Thank you, Marlene.
Hi, Walter McCartney here.
Thanks, Walter.
Waarom, Matthias? Rustig by die huis.
Carl, I can see that it's you, but you're breaking up terribly, so I wasn't able to hear anything you were saying. I think there's quite a few connection problems, maybe from your office, if you and the MM are in the same space.
Thank you, Chairperson. No, I'm at home, fairly casual. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Anyone else? Okay. Then members of the audit committee present. Mr. Barrell, I see you.
Councillor Richard Thorpe here.
Thanks, Richard. And Ray.
Johan Root here.
Hello, Johan.
Hi.
And I think I saw Mike Hennessy. Yes, Mike, I see your hand.
Good afternoon, Chair Lady. I'm here, Mike.
Thank you. And then members of the public. I don't see any members of the public on the list of participants. Jill, I just wanted to note that provincial government had asked to be invited to this impact meeting. They were available for the previous meeting. But now they've given their apologies, they can't attend due to prior commitments. They would like to attend the next impact meeting and they will be invited for that. Then in terms of yes.
Chairperson, before you proceed, it's Donovan Swanson here from the Department of Local Government.
Super, Mr. Swanson, yes.
Yes, we had a challenge, but it was resolved now. So I'm attending on behalf of the department.
Super. Well, it's lovely to have you here. You're most welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Then committee, in terms of the terms of reference, impacts terms of reference, the AG and internal audit must be invited. I just want to find out if they have been invited, Jill or MM.
Chair, if I may. It's Melanie Joffe. Yes, it's Melanie Joffe. I'm the Senior Manager from the Auditor General's Office.
Super.
And joining me is also Faisal Jacobs, and he's the Manager from the AG's office.
Faisal Jacobs. Thank you so much for joining us. You're very welcome. Glad to have you here. And then internal audits. I see Walter is here. Walter, you're representing internal audit.
That's correct.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Naki, I see you. I'm glad you've sorted out your problems. Can you hear us properly? Councillor Naki? Councillor Naki, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for being here. There we go. And then in terms of reference 3.27, the chairperson of the finance portfolio must be invited. I see that Councillor Krautz is here, so that's super. Thank you very much. I think, Jill, in terms of going forward, if we can just add these terms of reference items, the AG and the internal audit and the chairperson of finance in the list on the agenda of who is present. That'll help us in the future. Then we note that number 3, we note the provisions of Schedule 1, the Code of Conduct for Councillors. Point number 4, disclosure of interests by councillors. Does anyone have an interest? Anyone on the committee have an interest that they wish to disclose?
No, not from our side.
Thank you. Dr. Skeppers, I was just wondering, I was reading through the toolkit and wondering if it's possible that there could be a conflict between MPAC members' duties in terms of MPAC and their membership on a Section 80, where that Section 80 has delegated powers. And there would obviously be a conflict of interest there. I was wondering if for a future meeting, or perhaps the next meeting, we could have a list of the Section 80 delegated powers and just a report on how they could possibly affect MPAC members. Would that be possible from your side? I think we've lost our acting MM. I'll take it up with him after the meeting if he's not here. Okay, we move then on to point number 5, which is the consideration of the minutes of the previous meeting. 5.1 is consideration of the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March 2020. Those minutes are on pages 5 to 9 of the agenda. I wasn't at that meeting, so if those who were at the meeting can confirm whether those minutes are correct. Members of the committee, are there any changes to be made to those minutes? Councillor Chikolo?
Chair, I will propose that we adopt the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Chikolo. Just a second there.
Yes, I'll second Councillor Ace.
Thanks, Councillor Ace. So the minutes are approved as a true reflection of the proceedings. Can we go with that? Yes, super.
Yes, Chair.
We then move to page number 10 on the agenda, and it is the consideration of the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of March. Those minutes are on pages 11 to 13. Are there any amendments that anyone has seen? If not, can I have a proposer? Councillor Chikolo?
Yeah, I'll move.
Thank you.
Close.
And a seconder?
Councillor Ace will second.
Thank you, Councillor Ace. We can go with that then. We then move on to page number 14 on the agenda. Can you all turn off your mics? I'm getting a bit of feedback. Page 14 on the agenda is the consideration of the minutes held of the meeting held on the 18th of March. They're on pages 15 to 17. Can I get a proposer? Councillor Chikolo, your hand is staying up. Would you like to propose?
Sorry, Chair, it's an old hand.
Would you like to propose for the acceptance of these minutes?
Yeah, we can move with the minutes as they are, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
Councillor Ace will second.
Thank you very much. Then going with that recommendation on 5.3. Jill, then I was wondering, we don't have an item on the agenda. Can we add an item, make this next 6, which is matters arising? Because I see there are some matters that are arising from these minutes. Is Jill here? Carl, who's here from your team that can assist with this? I don't see Jill on the list of participants.
Chairperson, I will ensure that at your next agenda, a matters arising item would be on the agenda.
Thanks very much, Carl. But for now, let's make it item number 6. I see on page 7 there is a matter arising, which is MPAC 0303-2020. And the matter arising is at number C, which is that a comprehensive report on all matters referred to MPAC be submitted to the meeting scheduled for the 13th of May 2020. Now that meeting didn't go ahead, and there isn't a report on this agenda, which is a comprehensive report on the matters referred to MPAC. But in our supplementary agenda committee, we do have an item in terms of which there's a recommendation for all matters that have been referred to MPAC to be dealt with. Committee, are you happy then that this matter arising is not dealt with here, because we're going to be dealing with it in that item in the supplementary agenda? Everyone happy?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you,
Yes.
Councillor Chikolo.
Chairperson.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure, Chair, whether Councillor Matiwani has joined us yet.
I don't see him, Councillor Chikolo.
Is he not here? Okay. No, it's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Dr. Skeepers?
Just to report that I'm back online, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. You're still a little fuzzy. I'm going to turn up my sound. All right, then there's another matter arising on page 8, and that is MPAC 0603-2020, item B, and that is that a comprehensive report on the investigation on the civil matter arbitration Brenton Haven be submitted to MPAC to be held on the 13th of May. That item is on this agenda. Councillor Chikolo, your hand is up.
Sorry, Chair, old hand.
Thank you. Councillor, so that item is on this agenda, so that has been dealt with. The next matter arising is on MPAC, is on page 9, MPAC 0703-2020, and that is at C, that it be noted that a comprehensive report, including all representations received, will be submitted to MPAC on a date in March 2020, which must still be determined. Dr. Skeepers, I'm assuming this is to do with the annual report. So I'm assuming that that was done. Can you just confirm that that is correct?
Chairperson, I can confirm an item did in fact serve before MPAC, and the oversight report of MPAC were also submitted to council.
Perfect.
So it was done.
Thank you very much. And then the last matter arising that I have is on page 17, which says that that's S MPAC 0103-2020, item C, that the oversight report be submitted to the Municipal Council, and Mr. Mateus has just confirmed that that has been done. So are there any other matters arising that the committee would like to raise? If nothing, then we can move.
No, Chair, nothing.
Okay, great. So we're then moving on to what is now item number 7, which is the new items. And the first item is Brenton Haven Development Bulk Sewer Service Reports. This is coming from the Director of Technical Services. I know the Director of Technical Services is on leave at the moment. Is the acting director? I just want to check if the acting director is in the meeting. Dr. Skeepers, I don't see Royden, but this report isn't complicated, and actually my question is more around the fact that although this was referred to MPAC by council, I'm not entirely sure why this is an MPAC matter. Council referred it to MPAC for investigation, but this seems to me to be a purely legal matter that must proceed within the legal departments. Dr. Skeepers, can you just comment and give your view on whether this matter should proceed to be investigated by MPAC?
Chair, I'm struggling to hear you. I think I've heard you. You want my view on the Brenton matter?
Yes, please, MM. You know, when I look at it, it was a legal matter, and there is a recommendation from council that this matter be settled. So I can't see anything that needs to be investigated by MPAC at this stage. Would you agree, or do you think that this still falls within MPAC's mandates?
From my reading of it, Chairperson, and this is purely my reading of it, I might be wrong, but what it seems like, it seems as if the developer did not pay augmentation fees and
Yes.
instead did work in lieu of that.
Yes.
And I understood the recommendation from council to MPAC is for MPAC to see whether whether council actually suffered any loss as a result of that. But I agree with you. It's not really something that should be on MPAC's table unless we determine that the council has actually had suffered loss as a result of that. That would then have to come to MPAC. But I think I'm in agreement with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Skeepers. Committee members, do you have any thoughts on this item?
Chair.
Councillor Polo?
Chair.
I'm hearing Councillor Matiwani. Welcome, Councillor Matiwani.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Chipolo?
Oh, I thought it's Matiwane before me, Chair.
No, it's you and then Matiwani, please, Councillor Chikolo.
Okay. No, thanks, Chair. No, look, I agree with you, Chair, that with this it should be a legal matter. But I'm also just curious as to in the report itself, when the MMLs also now just alluded to it that the developer didn't pay the augmentation fees. If you also look at the report, I know this was done in 2013, and the report is saying that if you look at the background, the last paragraph, to rectify the French drain system, which was on council's property, the department insisted that the developer build a sewer pump station and rising main to service the development. I just want to understand, when this was discussed, was there maybe an expectation created to the developer that by doing that they won't be then paying the augmentation fees? Was that maybe the agreement of so? Just wondered. I'm curious about that, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Chikolo. Dr. Skeepers?
Chairperson, I would not venture to say that I know what happened here, but it is normal practice that a municipality sometimes say to a developer that in lieu of paying augmentation fees, we expect you to do some upgrade to infrastructure of the municipality. Now, I'm assuming that this is what happened here. So the council determined that the developer doesn't have to pay the augmentation fee if the developer provides the infrastructure that is described here. Now, the only question that then arises is if the infrastructure that they provide is significantly less valuable than the augmentation fees that they would have paid, that then becomes an issue as to whether the council suffered loss or not. But if it's more or less in the same ballpark, then that's normal practice by municipalities, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Skeepers. I agree with you. CFO?
No, thanks, Chair. I agree with you fully on the matter, because I went to try and read the previous report as to what was the intention of bringing this to MPAC, and I think you've touched it very well. The MPAC needs to resolve now that they note the report, but also MPAC needs to indicate that the matter be dealt with legally, but what is critical for MPAC and council is what the acting MM has highlighted now. Whether there was an agreement between the developer and the municipality for the developer to not to pay a portion or a full amount of augmentation fee, and as such will then do that infrastructure development. And if there is such agreement, is the amount then covered fully? If not, what is the difference? Did council then suffer? I think perhaps that was the intention of council, trying to understand whether they did suffer losses here by the developer not paying fully the amount. So I would suggest that the item goes back to council, explaining properly whether council did suffer or there was an agreement to set off the two against each other. If there was such an agreement, and then there's no loss that has been suffered by council, you know. So I would then suggest that MPEC must actually have a resolution that this must go to council as an item for legal services to be discussed at a council meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, CFO. Councillor Matiwani, I can't see your hand up. Are you wanting to speak?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, mine was going to say the same thing that the CFO said, because luckily I've met the developers of that property. Said they had an agreement with some of our officials in place. Now, for where we are, I think, Chair, it's a legal matter. Because if they're saying, because we once met them, they call us some of the councillors inside in one of the bedrooms inside. That guy take all the papers which had the agreement with officials of the municipality before our term. Now, it is very dicey in such a way that we need to get to the bottom of it, Chair, and make a determination as MPEC that did we lost money? Why did these officials sign a contract like this? Because end of the day, when the municipality want to develop a storage plant, which is their function, and give it else to the developer, it tells you that somehow there was an agreement by officials. We need to bring those officials. If we lost money, we need to bring them to the book. That's all that I'm saying.
Thanks, Councillor Matiwani. Dr. Skeepers, is your hand up again?
I'm sorry, it should have been lowered.
No problem. Thank you very much, everyone. I think then if you look at the recommendations, the A of the recommendations can be that the contents of the report be noted, but that B be that it be recommended to council that the matter be dealt with by the legal departments to determine what the agreement was with regards to the augmentation fees and to determine whether council has suffered a loss. Would that be correct, CFO? I see your hand up again.
No, sorry, that's correct, Chairperson, but I think we must add also, because Councillor Matiwana is correct, when he was a chairperson and we met the developers, what also must be determined, the officials that have signed those documents, whether they are delegated authority, because that's also something problematic about this whole agreement. It does not appear to have been signed by the MM or anyone at that time, you know, so that also must be determined, you know, whether those people have, because if it's signed by people who did not have a delegation, it's got other legal implications, and legal need to advise us in terms of that, because it may mean that the augmentation fee is payable and enforceable. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, CFO. I just want to get clarity on whether the legal department should report back to MPAC on the outcome of their investigation and then for MPAC to report to council, or whether legal department should report directly back to council. CFO?
Chair, I think they should report directly to council. It was never a matter for MPAC to really investigate. It was a legal matter that legal needs to have looked at the agreement and advise council in terms of that agreement. So they must report to council. Thanks.
Chair, I'm in agreement with that.
Great, thank you very much. So it would then be A, that the contents of the reports with regard to Brenton Haven Development Bulk Sewer Service be noted, and B, that it be recommended to council that the matter be dealt with by the legal departments to determine, firstly, what the agreement was with regards to the augmentation fees. Secondly, to determine whether council suffered a loss. Thirdly, to determine if the officials who signed the documents had the delegated authority to do so. And then lastly, that the legal department report back to council on their findings. Dr. Skeepers, are you happy with that? CFO, are you happy?
I'm happy, Chair. Thank you.
I'm happy. I'm covered. I'm covered, Chair.
Committee members, can we go with those recommendations?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We then move on to item 7.2, which is the item on irregular expenditure 2018 to 2019. This is a report coming from the CFO. CFO, I wonder, I think everyone has read this report. It has come to the committee twice. So I have a few questions, but I'll first hand over to the committee members to ask them if they have questions that they would like to raise. Committee members? Anyone? I don't see any hands. Yes? Who is that? Councillor Chikolo.
Yes, Chair, no, mine is just on the recommendations. That's why I thought I was going to wait for questions and then go to the recommendations.
All right, we can do that. I think on the actual reports, I just wanted to ask on page number 22, where it speaks of, where it goes to 1.14, and it says MPAC needs more time to analyze the documentation, the control environments and internal processes in order to come to a conclusion. My question is, has this already been submitted to MPAC, who has said we need more time, or is there an assumption that MPAC would need more time? When I read it, it seems to me like the administration needs more time to get this together because it's not part of this report. And then on page 23, it speaks of having considered the expenditure, MPAC is satisfied that all the expenditure is irregular and having been considered appropriately in terms of the steps. Now, this MPAC meeting hasn't decided that, so has it been decided previously? And it also says MPAC is of the view that the matters as listed below should be written off. Is that a decision that MPAC itself has taken? On the same page, it speaks about regulations 74 sub 1 of the municipal budget and reporting regulations, and says that this committee must consider the measures already taken to recover the expenditure, the cost of the measures already taken, and the estimated cost and likely benefits of further measures that can be taken. So that information isn't before this committee. So let me stop there maybe and ask the CFO just on those three questions. CFO, I see your hand is up. Can you go ahead?
No, thanks, Chair. You're correct. I think we should correct the English on 1.14. These matters are matters that are already contained in the reported financial statements. So in terms of the process, the matters are referred to each director to investigate within the directorate as to what happened, and then it get reported, we discuss it at management level. So these matters are still under the directorate. So it's not MPEC. The administration needs more time to analyze the information, because these matters has to do with tenders where you awarded a tender for R1, but you actually spend R1.50, you know. So we need to analyze the document properly as to what happened that led to the spending of R1.50, but the tender was awarded for R1. How did it go through the internal control environment that it has actually exceeded that amount? So it's not only about reporting the 50 cents difference that you overspent by 50 cents, but the control environment, what led to that situation that it actually caused to be overspent. So there's a lot of information that needs to be analyzed. Was it a variation order that was done but was never then submitted to the municipal manager to approve? Is there such documentation of that variation order? Was the variation order or the amount that exceeded the award within the 15% allowed in the construction contracts, because all of them are construction related contract, so that needs to be analyzed and put very correctly. If it was just done without a variation order being even applied, that is where then for now, when I looked at the expenditures as CFO and disclosed it in the financial statements, it is irregular in a sense that there is no proper documentation that explain why we exceeded the amount of the award of that specific tender. There is no documentation that we could establish as to there's a variation order or application to spend more than the 15%, which is our allowable, 20% allowable on construction contract. So it must change to administration needs more time to analyze, and this matter needs to go to the next impact. The work is quite far being done in terms of this. I would think if the next impact is in the next week or two, this can be provided to the next impact in terms of that. So we didn't want impact to make a conclusion that this one should be dealt with now. So administration needs more time. So that's one. And then you're corrected then, having said that, then we need to make a determination in terms of that regulation, whether there are measures that have been already or we're going to take to recover that amount that exceeded the budgetary amount, and then measure the cost of actually trying to recover that amount in relation to the benefit that the municipality has received, because if the award was for goods and services for R1, we're supposed to have received goods and services to the value of R1 and paid R1 for that. So if we have received goods and services for R1, but we paid R1.50, so we need to then make a determination of why we paid more, and that then to be recovered. So, Chair, I will stop there. So that that matter needs to go to come back to impact with a proper explanation in terms of why it was it exceeded. And I think somewhere in the recommendation, it does say that that MPEG request time. So it must be that for this report, that administration requests from MPEG more time to investigate this matter in relation to 1.14. So it must not be MPEG. Thank you, Chair. When I was writing the report, I was thinking MPEG and I was writing the report for MPEG. So it should actually say administration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, CFO. And then CFO, with regards to the other matters from up to, because that's 1.14, but the other matters 1.1 to 1.13, I just am missing the places where we have information with regards to the measures already taken to recover the expenditure, the cost of the measures, and the estimated cost and likely benefits. I'm also looking at the terms of impacts, terms of reference, and it says that when impact deals with irregular expenditure, it says that the accounting officer must report to the committee on all steps taken to authorize or certify or recover or write off the expenditure, as well as whether any criminal action was instituted, and that the committee must report to council on the appropriateness of the action taken. So I don't see that information in the reports in front of us with regards to the steps taken to recover, authorize, certify, or write off these amounts. CFO, if you can, and that's also in terms of Regulation 74.1, that information should be before the committee, should it not, CFO?
Thanks, Chair. There is an annexure attached to this report. in that annexure, then it's got 1.1, 1.2 up until 1.14. So after the investigation, with regard to 1.3, 1.5, 1.6, and 1.10, all of those matters should be resolved by MPEC to recover them as irregular and recover from the officials identified in that annexure. So then it deals with the issue of the measure. So that is the measure to actually recover those such expenditure, and we don't need to measure the cost because we're going to recover the full amount for those irregular expenditure from those officials. So the cost actually will be, it's an administrative cost for, it's not going to need a legal or other outside processes. We'll just create a debtor for those officials, and then they must pay that amount, So we don't need to evaluate the estimated cost and the likely benefit with regard to those matters because they are straightforward matters that are actually going to be recovered from those officials. And then with regard to the other matter, which is 1.4, and to recover as well, let me just quickly go back to 1.4. Just want to remind myself. Okay, the work how confirmed has been done. The user should have used a two service. Okay, with regard to 1.4, there was already a service provider appointed to do maintenance and repairs of vehicles. So the official went to somebody else to do maintenance and repairs of this specific vehicle, and there was no need for that official to go to somebody else because there were two service providers that were appointed to do the electrical maintenance for that. On top of that, the official in question here did not even bother to apply for a deviation and explain that there is maybe some circumstances or reason why they had to go for this service provider. Maybe it's a specialized electrical work or whatever. So there was not even a deviation. So this matter also, it's a irregular expenditure that needs to be recovered. So the issue of determining the cost is always not a straightforward one because the vehicle would have been repaired in any case. But now the question is, hindsight, would we have paid 6,400 if we have gone to the two service providers that were actually appointed to do this work? Because they would have quoted at the rates that they've submitted on the tender, which were actually lower than what this other service provider. So the question is always, do you then recover the full 6,400 or do you recover the difference between the 6,400 and the amount you would have paid if we have gone to the approved service providers, But on this matter, again, these are the typical thing that causes problem in NISA in terms of irregular expenditure increasing every year, where officials don't follow the supply chain process. And Circular 68 is very clear, even the amended one in 2019, that the amount should be recovered from that official. So there we're not going to even make a determination in terms of the difference between the amount. That full amount should be recovered from that official because it was not a process that was supposed to be followed with regard to that one. So, and then I think 1.3, 1.5, 1.6, and 1.10, I just want to remind myself, okay, most of those things were deliberately splitting quotations where you have within a space of 5 or 14 days, you've got 4 or 5 quotations of 1,800, 1,200, 1,900, where it could have been combined to get value for money and do an RFQ for that process. So those are the straightforward matters that also needs to be fully recovered. Then with regard to all other matters, I know the acting is new, but I just want to bring it to his attention that this is a problem in the organization, where yes, there is no criminal intent. There is value received by the municipality, but the officials are not following the proper process, in terms of dealing with this. And the biggest one, for example, is 1.1, where it is known that in December in Knysna, it's the busiest period. So our truck is not coping in terms of delivering the waste to Mossel Bay. But now officials needs to then actually write that and ask for a deviation for the municipal manager to ask a service provider outside to assist us in those days when our truck cannot cope. You can't just go to the service provider and call them and say they must go and pick up rubbish and take it to Mossel Bay. And when they send you an invoice, you then only write a deviation to the municipal manager. So if you look at Circular 68, both the before 2019 March and the one of 2019 March, Councillor Matiwane will recall, this is the matter that has actually been addressed as well there to say you cannot ask for a deviation after the fact. So if you're asking for the deviation, you should actually apply for the deviation from the municipal manager. The municipal manager approves the deviation. You then contact the service provider to perform the work. You cannot ask a deviation after the fact. One or two of these matters, it was a clear emergency where there was a stolen electrical cable, for example, that needed to be connected so that those people get connection. But again, you have to apply for the emergency. You can get the contractor and then you then inform the municipal manager on the same day. You cannot get the contractor to do the work a month later on. Then you try and explain to the municipal manager, do you remember that day that the cable was stolen and that those areas were cut for electricity, where to get MDL to do this, So those matters are investigated, but I know Councillor Matiwana is very strong on the issue of consequence management so that you stop officials from doing this. Although there is no corruption or it is clear that there was an emergency, but the proper process must still be followed in terms of that. So this matter is then a matter that needs to be addressed by the accounting officer in terms of consequence management. And we seem to be writing in all our reports that the MM is directed to implement consequence management. So maybe in this report, we should say that the accounting officer should report, it does say must report, because all the previous report, we said the MM should implement consequence management. But I think we wanted to emphasize now that the MM must report back to council in terms of how those consequence management have been applied. Because you see the same errors that was committed in 2013, 2015, 2014 are committed again. So when you look at the irregular expenditure, it appears as if there's nothing that is being really done to stop this process from happening. I'll stop there, Chairperson, for now.
Thank you, CFO. Councillor Matiwane and then Councillor Chikolo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Chair, I want to ask from the CFO a simple thing. Do departments within the municipality submit their procurement plan to his department as the procuring department? A reason why I'm asking that, if you can go to the last financial year and the year before, it's the same deviations. It's the same, it's a repertoire of the same thing. Hence, I'm asking, because if you have a procurement plan, you know how many items that you need to procure. The last MPEC meeting, the CFO said they will advise directors to embark on contracts to award, to advertise tenders, which are ad hoc basis, meaning that when we need to use Michelle, we'll go and get Michelle, but Michelle will go through a process of a proper procurement process so that we avoid these issues of deviation, because it seems if there's no proper plan of procurement, all these things that are happening here will happen to a point that you see now, there's no clear issue of saying that we must curb this, because end of the day, any deviation, any irregular expenditure that is happening without being planned, it tells that it's a lack of leadership from the administration side. Now I think it's the high time, from you to you, that if they don't have a procurement plan must be implemented in place so that whatever something, in December, in January, there are a lot of ways that the trucks must take. You can award a tender so that it avoids the issue of deviation, because it's a bad reflection. Thank you. Not deviation, irregular expenditures. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Matiwani. Councillor Chikolo?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, the CFO has covered a lot of what I wanted to say. It was not questions. I was also going to comment on some of the things, but just to pick up on what Councillor Matiwani has just said now about the procurement plan. I think that's very important, Chairperson, that we have those things. And I think we also need to move to the direction of the national minister that he started now, whereby your budget starts at zero, you start at zero. It's not as if in the previous year you had 2 rand and then we give you 5 or 10% more. I think we need to start at zero and say, look, I start here. So I think it's very important to have that procurement plan, Chairperson. But going back to 1.3 and 4 and consequence management, actually most of these, if you look at, if you read things like it is a deliberate split. It is someone who just went to the service provider and asked for services without following, and just now applied for a deviation later on. It's consequence, man. I just want to ask, Chairperson, do we think the recovery of these funds or money is enough to punish or to say this is wrong to the employees? Is recovering this money enough? Because it seems to be happening, as Councillor Matiwani said, it's happening year after year. So do you think just by trying to recover this money from the employees, is that enough for consequence management? Isn't there other instruments maybe that we can use? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Chikolo. Mr. Barrell?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I would just like to deal with the issue of how we deal with fruitless, wasteful, irregular expenditure, how we have dealt with it in the past, and what we should go towards. We don't have to wait for the AG to discover or to declare that it's irregular or fruitless and wasteful, and then go to council with a recommendation. It then refers it to MPAC, and MPAC has an investigation as to what should be done. I think if you interpret the regulations correctly, they assume that management will be on the lookout on a regular basis for fruitless and wasteful irregular expenditure, and then take some action, appropriate action, either corrective action to point out the mistake, and if it's repeated, go further. And where the council or the municipality has lost money as a result of the actions taken by the official, take steps already to recover it at that stage. They don't have to wait for it first to go to council and then to MPAC to take action. We've found in past years, by the time it goes through the processes we've run it, the recovery action will have prescribed, and we will not be able to recover it from the monies from the guilty parties. So I think we should perhaps look at evolving a policy which covers this whole decision and action trail in a different way, in the light of the obvious intent of the regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrell. Dr. Skeepers, I see your hand up. I'm leaving you, CFO, to last because I want you to answer some of the questions. But Dr. Skeepers, if you have a turn now, please.
Sure, thank you. I don't want to add too much. I think everything that has been said is valuable. I just want to just perhaps say, add one or 2 points. I think first of all, and I had this discussion with the audit committee as well. I think our intention must be to improve our system so that you know these kind of repeat offences doesn't happen. And what I find is that, especially because of the instability at leadership level, there seem to be, in a certain sense, not certainty about what should be done and how it should be followed. So we need to, from a management perspective, make sure that we document in standard operating procedures and policies what is expected of people, right? So that's in terms of strengthening the system and making sure that people know exactly what it is that is expected of them. Obviously, when there is malice intended and when people do things like splitting quotations to meet certain requirements and so on, I mean, there we have to act and make sure that we act decisively. A lot of the items in front of impact at the moment are old items. So in terms of recovering any losses, and even in terms of our ability to bring disciplinary action against people, is going to be very difficult. So for me, I think it's important that we work on the systemic matters, make sure that we strengthen the institutional capacity of the municipality to such an extent that these become exceptions and we can then deal with the exceptions, and that it's not a norm like it seems to be at the moment, where all procurement seems to not follow not all procurement, but where some procurement in the municipality doesn't follow or don't follow the correct procedures. So I thought I should just say that, Chair. I understand the frustration by members of the committee, but the answer for me should be a systemic one, strengthening the system instead of focusing on the individual discrepancies that we find now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Skeepers. I think it's very valuable, and maybe one of the recommendations that we will make is with regards to the development of an SOP, so that we can strengthen the system and people know what is expected and we don't have these old matters. CFO, before I hand over to you, I just want to get something clear in my mind. The items that we have as a recommendation from the municipal manager that should be written off, we haven't as a committee considered the measures taken to recover them. Is it correct that we should proceed to recommend to council that matters be written off without considering what has been done to recover? I see in Circular 68 it speaks about writing off not being a primary response, but should be subordinate to a recovery process. I know it's difficult. You said it's difficult to work out what you would have paid if the supply chain policy had been followed properly, but isn't that the job of Impact to get a report from the administration in that regard and then to make an informed decision? CFO, so if I can hand over to you with all of those questions. The one is about procurement plan. I think Dr. Skeepers has spoken to consequence management. Mr. Barrell spoke about the matter of prescription, and I think the SOP would also deal with that to speed things up. But CFO, if you can then speak about the procurement plan, and then also, as I've raised now, should we not be considering recovery before we recommend write-off? Thanks, CFO.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chair, this matter, I mean, if you look at, I'll try and deal with the questions as they are raised, but I just want to start in terms of what the Chairperson of the Audit Committee has raised. If you look at these matters coming from 2013 and 2012, 13, I think from my side, I must say, I'm having a little bit of comfort. I know Councillor Matiwana might not be convinced, having seated as a chairperson and looked at these matters for some time, over 2 years. I'm having a comfort in both the current acting MM and Dr. Gratz, because you see, part of the problem in the institution was that these matters, when it's irregular expenditure, it's a finance thing, you know. It's not a matter in terms of the legislation where each financial official exercising financial responsibilities got a responsibility in terms of ensuring that they follow the process appropriately, you know. So some of them are difficult, Chairperson of the Audit Committee, because if you split quotations, the director that receives that quotation and sign it off, or the manager receive it on Monday, the other one comes on a Thursday, the other one on the next Tuesday, it's 1,800, you know, and you look at the policy, you say, okay, it's less than 2,000, you don't need two quotation, you know. But after 2-3 days, it's difficult to trace that you have been actually signing 4 or 5 quotations in the last 15 days from the same service provider for similar work and all of that. That is why those one is difficult. But I'm trying to then add to what Councillor Matiwana is saying. The issue is to not necessarily we must recover the money only and that is sufficient. We must take disciplinary action against those officials, because the issue of recovering the money seems to be in the last 4 or 5 years not something that will cause officials not to continue with this behavior, you know. And Louis has actually touched it, that the problem then has been instability in terms of all these matters are then referred to the accounting officer to then take those consequence management action. But I agree with the chairperson of the audit committee that management should identify these matters, and we are trying to identify most of them, but of course there are others that are identified by the Auditor General. For example, all the ones where there was no deviation that was requested before time, immediately when that invoice is actually received and paid and there's no deviation, administratively we're supposed to have been geared immediately to actually deal with that matter at that time. But we then seem to process the payment and then later then wait the AG, if they pick it up, then it's reported as irregular expenditure. The cause for that has been the Circular 68, the one that was before 2019. If I can just brief everyone, because Councillor Matiwana will remember, that circular seemed to suggest that the expenditure is irregular at the moment when the payment is made. So you'll know the municipality is working on accrual basis. So if you go and instruct a service provider to work without an order and they send you an invoice, so there is a commitment that you committed the municipality to. And in all probability, if that service provider says that this official, and this official says, yes, I did, but I didn't follow the supply chain process, in all likelihood, that service provider would win that case. So Circular 68 of before March 2019 held the people that are making the payment accountable, which in this case will be your duty, your creditors, staff. You know, I think in the Western Cape we then wrote to Treasury to say this is wrong, because the official that must be held accountable is the one that instructs the service provider to do the work without an official order or official procurement process. That has since been amended, you know. So, but then we need to educate people in terms of that. I think the SOP, it's not formalized, but somewhere in our documents and our budget policy, it does say that the director within that directorate where the incident happened must investigate the matter and then make appropriate recommendations to the accounting officer before it goes to MPEC, you know. So we just need to tighten that process. There is some process, and then maybe do a workshop again in terms of the staff. But you would recall after the Cliff Decker Mubesco investigation, we did a workshop and the training of all staff to make them aware that you cannot split orders. You cannot do what you call a deviation after the fact. That was done to all the staff. I think we need to emphasize the issue of consequence management. As long as we don't discipline. Discipline does not necessarily mean somebody is charged and fired, but discipline in terms of even getting a warning, because Councillor Matiwana is correct. Some of these matters are actually repetitive from the same officials who were in that report of 2014-15, Councillor Matiwana, 14-15, and well as 16-17 report, So we just have to deal with that, but I'm confident that the acting MM will be able to address the matter, as I have seen in terms of how we address matters with regard to this. So there is a procurement plan that is submitted. Now, this is what becomes the problem. Most of the time administratively, we want to then fight and argue with the AG at the end of the process when financial statements or audit is being done. So there's a procurement plan that is submitted, but that procurement plan, we administratively don't monitor it in terms of ensuring that is properly followed. For example, the AG last year came with this issue of piggyback, In Isla, if you look at the engineering contracts, consultant services, the last 5 years, we never had our tender on our own. Although we have a procurement plan, we know what we want to do, want to deliver, but we never go out on a tender to get service providers, engineering service providers to draft those tenders or to assist us with drawings and all of those things, So those are the matters that need stability and at management level be actually addressed instead of going at the later stage and argue with the Auditor General, because it becomes a repetitive issue that you just go and do piggyback. You're not showing following year that you have actually tried to go out on a tender or you've tried to do something. The critical issue is, as management or as a municipality, we must show that we have tried to address this matter from what has been indicated last time as a control deficiency or the problem. Now, the last one, Councillor Wasserman, the issue of MPEG making assessment of the recoverability. Now, if you look at all the matters that are recommended that they must be written off, it's all of them. The municipality has actually received the value. I think it's also in the Auditor General Act now, but you have to make a determination. Did the municipality incur any loss? So it is difficult to actually just recover the amount if there's no loss. If you look at the, I think 1.3, the MDL situation, there was a stolen cable. It was emergency. MDL went to repair it. The amount that they've charged us, it's not far-fetched from the normal amount that they were actually using in the previous tender, because their previous tender lapsed. So they've used those same rates that they were charging in that lapsed tender. So that's how we evaluate it. And then we say, really, there's no loss that has been incurred by the municipality. So you cannot really recover that from the official, because if you recover from that official, the municipality will get what you call, I don't know legally, but it's a double benefit, So because the cable was actually procured, the service was provided. Now you cannot the value of that service that was provided and then try and recover that money from the official again. I just forgot the legal term, but then the municipality will actually be benefiting twice in terms of that process. So that is why those matters are considered matters to be written off. But there must still be consequence management in terms of dealing with these matters. That consequence management could include a workshop or training of those officials, specifically targeted training for them to make them understand, if they don't understand, that they're supposed to have followed a supply chain process. So I'm not sure if I'm answering you completely, Councillor Wasserman, but in all of those matters, there is really no recoverability that can be done, because the municipality has actually received that full benefit in terms of that matter. You have not paid more than what you would have paid.
Thank you, CFO. I hear what you're saying, but what worries me is that there's nothing besides what you've just said now. If I look at the reports in front of me, there isn't anything except for in point 1.1, it speaks of how the municipality received the benefit as the services were rendered, but it doesn't speak about whether the municipality incurred any loss. And in the other items, it doesn't tell me whether benefit was received. So I don't know, Dr. Skeepers, whether we can rely on what the CFO, whether it's sufficient to rely on the verbal communication from the CFO now, or whether something should come to the committee just with regards to the items that are recommended for write-off. I'm very hesitant to go ahead without considering properly the items set out in Regulation 74.1 and having a look at whether the municipality incurred a loss and whether any amounts can be recovered without actually going through that process. So, Dr. Skeepers, I just want to know from you whether we can't, I think we'll have a special meeting in any event soon, but instead of at this stage recommending for write-off without considering properly what should be considered in terms of Regulation 74, whether we can't have a report just on the items set out in D with regards to an evaluation in terms of Regulation 74. Dr. Skeepers, would that be possible? CFO, I see your hand up.
Chairperson, no, I fully. Sorry, should I continue?
I think CFO go first. Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. Thanks. Chairperson, I fully get what you're saying. I agree. What can be done is, since we're going to have another special MPEG, that in each of these matters, then it must actually some elaboration more in terms of exactly what you're asking in terms of these matters. For example, how we would deal with it. The 1.1, we would then provide MPEG with the amount that was in the tender of Greenscape before it has expired. How much were they charging us? And then we would provide them with this quotation, how much they charge, so that you are able to see that they actually did not charge you more than that expired tender, because what happened here, the tender expired and was used, So then you can be able to say that there's no amount that should actually be recovered because you did not lose money. I think I fully agree with you. That can be added to elaborate more on each point that needs to be considered for write-off, Chair. I don't have an objection that the matter can be referred to the next MPEG to give that elaboration. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, CFO. That would make me feel that MPAC is doing its job in terms of the regs. I think, committee, if you're happy, can we go to the recommendations and just go through them one at a time to make sure that we are happy with them? The recommendations are A, that the contents of the reports be noted, which I think is fine. B says that MPAC request and recommend council to resolve to recover the irregular expenditure as indicated and explained in points 1.3, 1.5, 1.6, and 1.10 above. I agree with that, but I see that the wording of C is exactly the same. MPAC requests and recommend to council to resolve and recover the irregular expenditure as indicated and explained in point 1.4. CFO, can we not just add 1.4 into B?
We can do that, Chair. We can add that.
Thank you very much. Then D, we've just spoken about that one, to say that a report be submitted to the next MPAC meeting, in terms of which item points 1.1, 1.2, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, 1.12 and 1.13 be evaluated in terms of Regulation 74.1. CFO, would you be happy with that recommendation?
That's correct, Chair. I'm happy with that. Then it can be submitted in the next MPAC meeting.
Thank you. To the next MPAC meeting. And CFO, I'm taking out 1.11. We'll discuss that later because I don't think that that is one that should be considered irrecoverable and written off. That's the one you've actually spoken to, that there are elements of fraud involved. Then we go to E, that MPAC request council for more time to investigate and report back with regards to 1.14 in relation to tender expenditure exceeding tender awards amounts. So that's fine. We've discussed that. The administration needs more time. Then it'll be F.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes. Councillor Chikolo?
Chair, we amending that most. I think the CFO gave a wording for that, with the wording for that. That it's not MPAC who needs time. It's actually the administration.
Yes, but MPAC will, in fact, in its report, be requesting more time. So what we can say is that MPAC requests council for more time for the administration to investigate.
Correct. Sure.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. And also, so that MPAC requests council for more time for the administration to investigate and report back with regards to 1.14 above in relation to tender expenditure exceeding tender awards amounts, and that a report in this regard be brought to the next MPAC meeting. Then F, MPAC request and recommend council to instruct the municipal manager to apply and implement consequence management within 14 days from the date of the council resolution. But then I think we need to add, considering our discussion, that the municipal manager reports back to council on the steps taken. Committee, are you happy with that?
Agreed, Chair.
And then G, after what the acting municipal manager said, that we have a recommendation G, that the administration draft an SOP, a standard operating procedure, on how irregular expenditure should be dealt with within the municipality. Dr. Skeepers, would you be happy with that?
I'm happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Super. And then H, we haven't, the problem with 1.11 is in the recommendations, it recommends that that one be irrecoverable and written off. But in the item, it speaks about how this transaction has the elements of fraud and needs to be further investigated by the internal audit units. And also in the financial implications discussion, it says with regards to 1.11, we recommend a principal decision to have these instances investigated. So could I suggest that as an H, we recommend to council that the expenditure explained in points 1.11 be investigated by the internal audit unit and that a report thereon be submitted to council. CFO?
I am covered, Chair. I was going to say that that is an error. That 1.11, it's from my little internal auditing background, it's got clear elements of fraud. So it must be just further investigated and be reported to council. I would assist the internal audit in providing the information in that regard. So it's an error that it must be part of D, so it should not be removed from D.
Thanks, CFO. Mr. Barrell, your hand is up. Mr. Barrell? We'll wait for Mr. Barrell to come back in.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. I had difficulty miking myself. The paragraph G that you've added, should we not include unauthorized, fruitless and wasteful expenditure as well?
Yes, I think that would be wise. Acting MM, Dr. Skeepers, would you be happy with that?
If I heard correctly, the suggestion is that we include fruitless and wasteful expenditure in the SOP. And if that is correct,
that's right.
I would rather have separate SOPs for irregular expenditure and an SOP for fruitless and wasteful expenditure.
Okay, so can we then say that the administration draft SOPs on how irregular as well as unauthorized, fruitless and wasteful expenditure should be dealt with by NISA in NISA municipality? Would everyone be happy with that?
Happy, Chair.
Yes, I'm happy.
Great.
Yes,
so,
that's fine.
Carl, we've actually joined B and C. So we still have an A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, actually. Have you managed to record what we've been saying as we've been going, or do you want us to run through it again?
Chairperson, we've got it. In actual fact, it's A to G. We've got it.
That's right. That's it. Thank you very much. Can we go with those recommendations, committee?
Yes, yes, Chairperson. We have been.
Thank
Yes, Chairperson.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, super. Then we move on to the supplementary agenda. And it is item 6.4. Is it 6.3 or 6.4? Let me just check. It's item 6.3, and it is a report on the functioning and terms of reference for MPAC. So I think just to preface this item by saying that I went through, when I was appointed, I went through the terms of reference that Council had approved for MPAC, and specifically the delegations, where Council told MPAC what it is supposed to do. And I picked out there were 3 issues that I picked out that I thought were of concern. The one is with regards to the fact that MPAC should be evaluating its effectiveness. Councillor Naki, I think your mic might still be on. So the MPAC should be evaluating its effectiveness in relation to what it was told to do in its terms of reference. There should also be a work program. And there should also be, we should be looking at issues raised by the audit committee as well as the oversight report. So I'm not going to go through the whole item. I'm assuming that you've all read it. Dr. Skeepers, is there anything that you want to say about this item before I give the committee a chance to ask questions on it?
Chair, not much, except to say, like I said in the report, that it seems as if we did not implement fully the terms of reference up to now, and that we are now planning to do so, both from impact side, but also there's a requirement on Council to make sure that impact follows the delegations that it has given it through the terms of reference. So I don't have anything to add to the report at this point, Chair, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Thank you, Dr. Skeepers. I think it's very important in the discussion that you've given on page 4 that it says that MPAC has been clearly defined to perform proper oversight. It is evident that MPAC has not effectively performed this oversight role as envisaged in the terms of reference. It has, for instance, been noted that MPAC has not submitted a report to Council on its performance. And as you've said, equally, Council has not insisted that such a report be provided to Council. The administrative function of MPAC has been a challenge which has been identified, and the administration has discussed and agreed that the support provided to MPAC has not been optimal up to now for effective functioning, and the acting municipal manager has addressed the matter and instructed that effective administrative support be provided to MPAC, and that the reports as required in terms of the terms of reference be prepared and submitted on a special MPAC meeting to be held in August. So is there anyone in the committee who has any questions on this item? Councillor Chikolo.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, mine, I actually don't have a question. It's just a suggestion. It's something that I've been raising even in the time of the municipal manager. And I did ask the question in the council meeting that have we adopted the Circular 63? And it became apparent later on that the answer in the meeting was no, Council never adopted it. But at a later stage, it became apparent that we did actually adopt Circular 63, which give guidelines on how you deal with your work plan, for an example. If I can give you an example in the garden route, we deal with the annual report. We finish it in December already. Yesterday, we just had a council meeting whereby we adopted a work plan, which I can share with you, Chair, later on, or anyone else who wants to see it. It gives proper guidance on how we deal with these issues. And annual report, we should be done with it in December already. So I'm very much keen, Chair, that we do follow those guidelines of that Circular 63. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Chikolo. I think we'll go through the recommendations so that the committee is fully on board with them. But we do have training that's being done by SALGA. I think it's on the 5th of August. That date has been set aside for that training, and I've asked that training specifically be on the toolkits. And in the toolkits, it does make reference to the work plan. And I think if the garden route has been doing this, it would be great if the administration can have a look at that and see what has been done so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But if we can go through the recommendations and then we'll just get a clear idea of what it is that we're asking for. A is that a report be drafted by the administration so that the committee is able to evaluate its effectiveness in implementing the provisions of its terms of reference, as that is a requirement in the terms of reference. B, that the report referred to in A lists each function or requirements of MPAC contained in the terms of reference and sets out whether the function or requirement has been met in the previous financial year and provides the details of the work undertaken where relevant. C, that the report referred to in A serve at a special MPAC meeting to be held on, and I think that'll be in August, Dr. Skeppers, and we can decide on a date. I think we'll have to decide on a date now. In fact, Dr. Skeppers, what can we look at 2 weeks from now, which would be the 11th of August?
Chair, I've seen that date somewhere. The 11th of August has been identified somewhere as a date for the next.
Okay, super. Let's just see here, looking in my diary at whether there's anything. There's an audit committee meeting in the morning on the 11th, but then we can have the meeting in the afternoon, so that would be perfect. So let's make it on the 11th of August. D, that the administration develops an MPAC work plan with which to implement the delegations set out in the terms of reference. Dr. Skeppers, your hand is up. Do you want to come in here?
No, that's an old one. I'm sorry.
Okay. E, that the work plan referred to in D be linked to the overall planning cycle of the Municipal Council, and that ensures that all legislative deadlines which relate to MPAC's competencies are adhered to. I think, Councillor Chikolo, that will meet your concern with regards to what we should already be doing in December. F, that the administration develops a monitoring and tracing mechanism that is aligned with the work plan referred to in D and which will include a record of matters submitted to and investigated by MPAC, a record of resolutions taken by MPAC in respect of each matter referred to above, a record of recommendations made to Council and the date and nature of the Council response or resolution, and the outcome of the recommendation, whether it's been implemented or not implemented, and any reason for not implementing. And then G, that the work plan and monitoring and tracing mechanism referred to in D and E serve at a special MPAC meeting to be held in August 2020, so that'll be the same date on the 18th. H, that a report be drafted by the administration detailing the matters raised in the past 3 years' audit reports. 2, the recommendations made in the previous 3 years' oversight reports in terms of section 129 of the MFMA, and 3, whether the matters in 1 and 2 above have been attended to. And lastly, that the report referred to in H serve at a special MPAC meeting to be held in August 2020, and that's the 11th of August 2020 for all of those. Committee, do you have any questions or comments on the recommendations? Councillor Ace?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think they're excellent because at present, as the time passes, some items appear to be swept under the carpet. And while it may be uncomfortable for us to air our dirty laundry, it's our duty to ensure that they are all properly dealt with. And we're on the right track to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ace. Yes, that is the idea, to keep track of things so that nothing does slip through the cracks. So committee members, can we go with those recommendations? Yes?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Great.
Yes,
Thank you very
yes,
much.
Chair, yes.
Thanks. Before we finish up, I saw, Dr. Skeppers, from the terms of reference that a matter can be referred directly to MPAC by a member of the public. And I just wanted to know, in practice, how would that work? Would it have to come to me directly and then I liaise with you about putting it on the agenda? And just in terms of practical arrangements, how would that happen?
Chair, I've also seen that, and that makes me a little bit worried. I think we need to talk about whether it is feasible or advisable to have that remain as part of the terms of reference, and if council decides that it should remain there, then I think we need to put in place a proper mechanism to make sure that we do not that this doesn't get abused. And I'll tell you the reason why I'm saying this, Chair. We are being inundated with investigations and complaints, and sometimes some of these things are not. I'm trying to use the correct word so that I don't distract from or detract from people's efforts. But some of them are really trivial and takes up a lot of time in the administration. So I would like us to in our next meeting, just also in our report that we'll submit to you, think about the whether we should keep that, and if we do, put in place a mechanism that does not open you up, Chair, to abuse by people. But we'll let us talk about it. I don't think I'm in the position now to give you a definitive answer on that, Chair.
Thanks very much, Dr. Skeppers. I agree with you. I think it is something that we must talk about, and put in place a mechanism for how that would work and have a discussion about it, because it is in the SOP. I mean, it is in the terms of reference. And so council has approved that is what it wants this committee to do. Councillor Chikolo and then CFO.
Thanks, Chair. No, Chair, I agree. I think we need to talk about this. I think it's time to talk about it. But I also wanted to say, I do remember when, I think early in this term, it did happen. I know of an incident whereby a resident put in a complaint straight to MPAC, and the person was even called in as to come and present her case in the meeting. So, but I think let's just find out what was good about that and what was bad about it, and try and look at how can we, if we decide on taking that, we really need that, then we try and improve on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Chikolo. CFO?
Chairperson, I would also like a chance.
Yeah, I think the MMS partly covered me. We can talk about it maybe later, but there is other legislation and it is assumed, but maybe we need to just define it in terms of reference specifically, how this should be going about. Because, for example, if it's a complaint against the CFO, it must be sent to the municipal manager. There's other legislation and other procedures that provide for these things. If it's against the MM, it must be sent to the mayor, and then the mayor. But the person requesting as a member of the public can ask that the matter be referred to MPAC for investigation. But so it means if it's the MM, it can be sent to the mayor requesting that. If it's the CFO, can be sent to the MM. So the MM will then submit it to the chairperson of MPAC to inform the chairperson of MPAC that there is this request, because in any case, the MPAC will be assisted by administration in terms of to exclude the person that there's a complaint about in terms of being part of the administrative process that actually investigate the matter. But yeah, I agree with the MM. We we have to talk about it and then outline it properly. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very
Madam
much,
Chair?
CFO. Carl, you want to say something? Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair, I think in your discussions, it would be useful if you could refer to the petition policy. I think the petition policy addresses it to a certain extent.
Yes, Carl, correct.
Yes, you're right. Thanks very much. So I think, Dr. Skeppers, let's also have something on that in our next meeting, that we can start to get some clarity on how that process would fit in with other processes we already have in place. And that brings us to the end of this meeting. So I want to say thank you to everyone that has joined us and participated. It was a very productive meeting. I enjoyed it a lot as my first meeting, and I'm looking forward to us working well and hard together in the future. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Meeting is
Chair.
adjourned.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chair. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.